Here's the deal. The notion that we might be living in some sort of simulation is definitely not new. Something that this idea was introduced by the Matrix, but it actually goes much further than that. And as we see the developments in computational technology and the progress we see with things like VR and AR, the question continues to rise, whether we might already be in one of the simulations. So, is there a way to find out, or at least find some hints? Well, let's figure this out. Starting with the first pro-simulation argument. Our world consists of pixels. This is what quantum mechanics tells us. The word quantum actually means consisting of discrete units, of something that can be further broken down. So things like a Planck's unit of mass, a Planck's unit of time, and other units that are the smallest possible allowed by our laws of physics, they are the pixels that our world consists of. And you know what? Discrete systems like that are very suitable for all sorts of computations compared to continuous ones. And even more than that, the actual existence of mathematics and how well it fits into all other computations related to natural sciences sort of hints us that there is some kind of source code behind the fabric of our reality. Math provides us with abstractions that somehow can interlink natural phenomena that at a first glance might seem completely unrelated, but in fact they are governed by very similar mathematical concepts. If this ain't code reuse for optimization purposes, what is that? But we can go even further than that. Once we dive down into the quantum world at the minimum scale possible, particles aren't even rendered unless you interact with them. You must probably heard about it as the observer effect, which still bothers the mind of physicists around the world with its weirdness. It is believed that before we interact with particles, they are just a cloud of probability, but the moment you need to do something to it or get some information from it, the wave function collapses and we're given a place and time where we can find the particle in question. And almost this exact technique is used in coding of games in 3D spaces. If you are not interacting with something, the computer doesn't even bother to render it, and it looks like the universe is doing just the same thing. And speaking of games, there is another similar thing that can be observed in much larger scales. You see, because of the speed of light, which actually is speed of causality rather than speed of light, but anyway, because it is limited, each one of us has our own cosmic horizon, which is a finite amount of space that we can theoretically interact with, meaning that it is sort of like a circle of light around each of the characters we often see in games. Anything beyond this circle is out of our reach and might not even be rendered for us. And if we move around, the circle of light moves with us. This is exactly how a cosmic horizon works, meaning it could be that our universe is only rendered around us, just like in that episode of Rick and Morty. Another argument that hints that our world might be just a simulation is the anthropic principle, which I personally don't like at all, especially its strong version. It can be vaguely described as something like that. All of the laws of physics, all the fundamental constants are somehow perfectly balanced to exactly allow our existence. Our world is just perfectly tuned for there to be galaxies, stars, planets, and so on. If you change even one of those parameters by the slightest of margins, everything falls apart. So it is just if someone spent a lot of time balancing the whole thing, just like they balance a game. If you want even more science, well, here is another one: extra dimensions. And it is not something that bad sci-fi usually refers to when they need to justify teleportation or something like that. It's actually legit. Let me explain. So we live in a world with 3 spatial dimensions, right? And it is practically impossible for us to imagine and visualize something beyond that. However, it seems like our laws of physics might require additional dimensions. Like, for example, string theory that works with 10 or even 12 spatial dimensions that are somehow compactified and hidden from us. This can be a result of yet another technique often used by game developers. Imagine if you want to create, let's say, a platformer in 2D, but you have a game engine that works in 3D. Well, what do? Just switch off the third dimension and write your game. Developing a separate engine for that would be inefficient and you already have the tools to do what you want. But it means that the game engine will still perform all its computations in 3D, with one of them just being set to some kind of constant. And if someday string theory or something similar will be proven to be correct, it might just give us another strong hint that we're in a game that was written on a game engine with more dimensions than 3, and we're just some kind of platformer or something like that. However, my favorite hint was seen in 1940 by none other than John Wheeler. He suggested a concept called the One Electron Universe. He noticed that all the electrons in the world are exactly the same, every single one of them. So he had a wild thought that it can actually be the same electron that just travels back and forth in time. When it goes forward, it's an electron, when it goes backwards, it's a positron. And this might be a wild idea that has its own problems, like for example, for that to be true we should see exactly equal amount of electrons and positrons, which doesn't seem to be the case, but still it shows us a very interesting idea, that each elementary particle out there could be just a single object stored in memory and everything else is just hyperlinks to that object. That would be a great thing to optimize the simulation, wouldn't it? And if you think about it, the laws of physics are just our own attempt of creating a simulation. All these equations, formulas, laws are used for creating a virtual world, a mental model in our heads that we try to match the outside world to as good as possible. And if we do that well enough, it means that we can predict things that will happen in the future and know things that are happening in the past. That is exactly what physics is. Creating a virtual world that we know how it works and try matching it to the real world as good as possible. And the entire fact that we are succeeding in this task gives us a strong hint that we might be living in a simulation. And of course, it's easy to start finding analogies with actual computer games. Like if there is a simulation and if there is some kind of source code, it means that someone has written it. But it might not be a requirement at all. The fact that our world looks like a computer game in a lot of aspects just means that there might be some computation going on in the background. It just suggests us the true nature of information and the informational transformations that can be applied to it. So it's not about the creator or some kind of higher power. The fact that we live in a simulation might just mean that the entire universe can simply behave as a giant computer that computes itself, following some set of rules, which is exactly what makes all games interesting. It's the rules that give every game out there some sort of sense, meaning that living in a simulation might not be as bad as most of you imagined when you started watching this video. So let me know what you think. Do we live in some kind of a computer game? Is information the king? Or maybe you disagree. Maybe you think that existence of irrational numbers denies the simulation hypothesis or something like that. It might be a very interesting discussion. So while you're waiting for your white rabbit or a red pill, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe for more content like that, share this video, support us on Patreon if you feel like it, but most importantly, stay curious, my friends.